know all of them. So, in opening government, which team do we have? Settle down, Swede. In opening opposition, which team do we have? UCD Law A. In closing government, which team do we have?
Rotterdam A.
Rotterdam A. And in closing opposition, I know this because I'm Serbian, we have Belgrade A. Okay. The motion before the House is something along the lines of, this House believes that states should grant total self-governance to indigenous peoples, for example, the Inuit in Alaska, or the Sami in Sweden. I'm sure I mispronounced it, but that's okay. So, without further ado, call upon the Prime Minister to propose the motion. Hear, hear.
I'd ask not to be strict.
Oh. Oh no, wait.
Sorry, Steve. I made this mistake.
There we go. Welcome back.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you about what duty the state has specifically to these Indigenous communities. Secondly, I'm going to talk about how the state should interact with these communities. And finally, I'm going to talk about alienation. Just before all of that, I'm just going to talk about what we stand over. Number one, we stand over laws, basic laws and norms and customs and freedoms being respected that are generally given in society, given specifically to these communities. Secondly, what we stand over these communities, not being economically isolated, being supported by the state. Thirdly, what we stand over is that narratives should never exist that it's them versus us, that they're no longer a part of our state because they have their own. Now, they talk about the fact that we can't do anything to prevent our culture. Note a couple of things that exist under status quo. The Maori communities do not have self-governance, but they do have spiritual prisons because the New Zealand government recognised the to be able to access their religion in the best way, or their culture in the best way, to have their own specific prisons. Roma communities have travelling education services that provide them the ability to access their culture and to be specifically able to specifically able to interact with the state. Now, there's quotas on parliaments and seats for specifically the Maori party in New Zealand, and they get guaranteed representation on either side of the house. Now, the policies that we have specifically benefit the culture without any of the harms to staff that exist when you give them self-governance. That's what we stand over, and that's what they have to engage with in this debate. 2 points for rebuttal. Number one, we heard, how can you ever provide cultural protection? We just say fundamentally we're the government. We say if there's enough capital to give these people self-governance, there's probably enough capital to invest more money in those services. And secondly, they talk about the fact you're going to financially support them. I think it's specifically easier to we as a state to say we're going to give money to the poorest in our community to engage with them to access their culture than say we're going to give self-government and then continue to support that own government. We think there's less of a capital for the continued financial support of those communities at the point at which they do get self-governance. Secondly, we heard at the very end of the PM speech that now there's better bargaining because you have your own community. No, because when I have my own community, I don't engage with that state. That means I'm not a voter bloc they care about. That means I'm not a movement they have to care any heed to because I have my own self-governance. That means you don't get any better bargaining. You get people opting out of the state and not engaging with it. That's horrible for ever trying to campaign to get better things done for them. First point is substantive, duty owed to the citizens by the state. Note there's norms that exist in society that we as a state specifically combat, and harms that exist where we use things like policing norms to combat them. Note in Indigenous communities there's specific power imbalances that make it actively harder for you in those certain circumstances. So for example, for women, sexual assault in things like the First Nation communities is specifically unquestioned because tribal elders have extreme power in those circumstances. That's why things like femicide are so common in those communities. People feel they can never escape those circumstances or they never have the power to do anything. We as a state owe a duty to have our norms and customs and have our laws in those communities to prevent that ever specifically happening. Even things like without these power imbalances, just things like having higher levels of depression being hugely prevalent in Inuit communities. I mean, the state needs to specifically intervene in those communities to offer services. You lose the ability to do that when they get self-governance. We say to combat these norms and specifically combat the lack of resources that exist in these areas. Because note that it's highly unlikely that any of these communities can be economically independent. We think the ability for them to specifically get more money is combated at the point at which they get isolated. We say the state has a duty to these communities specifically to give them the resources and give them the continued support, mostly because all of what OG talked about when they talked about being the communities that have been hurt the most and been damaged the most historically. We say the state has an added duty to give them the best quality of service. And that happens when the state directly engages with them. Secondly, on how the state should interact with communities. Note that particularly like Indigenous communities, particularly areas like Inuit communities in Alaska, suffer huge levels of things like extremely high levels of depression, extremely lack of job opportunities, lack of economic opportunities, or lack of ability to leave these areas, specifically because there's systematic underinvestment in these areas. But more importantly, there's systematic people not wanting to care about these communities. We say the state has an added duty to specifically want to engage with them. The point at which we're offering them the self-governance, we think it's probably reasonable to say we're going to do things like the same if political capital exists, to do things like increase spending in these areas. There's no, the comparative is to support them, because the capital that you give to these communities combats those norms in a way that you never can, because the ability for this United States to specifically fund or especially fund Inuit communities is significantly more so than where it's self-governed and they have to fund all of their own policing or the vast majority of policing. Even if that's not true, with a state is like a state of a collective being, means the specific ability to combat them better or do things like provide added services that you lose specifically when they are self-governed. We think that's specifically a benefit on our side of the house. I'll take a few eyes.
Yeah, we'll say that the state has no motivation to protect these communities because the state has no connection to the communities.
like if the state has motivation to give them self-governance, give a part of their like land to allow them to rule themselves and lose out on tax revenue, say there's probably relevance specifically help them. We don't see it as a debate and they can stand over a situation where they have self-governance, but also not stand over a situation where we don't care about them, we don't think it's comparative. Third point on alienation. Note that when you opt out of this circumstance, it specifically gives the idea that these communities are different and need to be treated in a different way. We recognise on our side that there are certain cultural differences. That's why we stood over everything we stand over in the framing that exists under status quo without giving them self-governance. The specific difference that exists when you give them self-governance, you permanently entrench a narrative that these people are specifically different to your community. That results in things like xenophobia on the ground, at the point at which people say, well, the Indian community used to engage with us in our Alaskan time, but now they don't want to do that at the point at which they have self-government. That makes it worse for those communities to ever want to interact with the state, because the only way you get any kind of change, when they talk about the fact these communities are more willing to engage, the only way they get engagement is when people feel specifically comfortable with that state. At the point at which you get entrenched narratives of xenophobia, you lose that. You fix that on our side of the debate when you mandate things like parliament voters, when you mandate things like representation or specific cultural boards or cultural prisons for those communities. That's the same way you get increased representation without all of the harms. But more importantly, it's harder for you to ever want to leave that community at the point at which you're permanently painted in a circumstance where you've given self-government. Why? Because the right to work somewhere else is crucially important to these people, and when you have communities that are systematically underdeveloped. When a xenophobic attitude exists, that now you have your own area and you shouldn't be coming into ours, or at the very least you have your own circumstance and we don't need you to the same extent, I think that is incredibly harmful in ever trying to combat these circumstances. What we say is when you're now viewed as having an Inuit community, you're not viewed as uniquely American, you're viewed as being Inuit, or you're now viewed as being Sami instead of being specifically Swedish. I think that's incredibly harmful when you want to engage with that world. Because why? Because when you have that kind of entrenched system, it means you're viewed as someone who is not has the same legitimacy, or at the very least is coming out of your circumstance into another circumstance to access that job opportunity. We think that results in xenophobia on the ground, but even if it doesn't, I think it results in being systematically harder for you to ever feel comfortable leaving your community to access a broader world or access more economic opportunities. What we say fundamentally is these are the groups that suffer from cultural isolation, but more importantly, suffer from incredible hardships because the state doesn't want to intervene. We think when you do things like mandate things like specific positions in parliament, when you mandate things like culture reports, you get all of the benefits on our side without the incredible harms of giving them self-governance. So happy to oppose.
Thank you very much. And now the Deputy Prime Minister here. Would you like the stream on, or are you okay?
Yeah, sure. Stream away.
Away or stream away?
No, we can stream. Okay. Yes. Are you ready? Everybody? Oh my god. Okay. Okay, so like open opposition tells us, so it's difficult to leave. We tell you right now, it is difficult to stay in these communities. We say these communities have the right to exist, and we say the right to exist is meaningless without the ability to govern themselves. We tell you that without the infrastructure upon which to build their societies, these communities are functionally dying. We're saying that opposition has to defend the status quo, where these communities are not being slowly empowered step by step, but are being stifled by governments which either passively or actively reject them. So I'm going to talk about those two cases. First one is some direct rebuttal. On this providing direct benefits, first of all, this sexual assault, for example, enforcement is very weak in the communities for a reason already. So we don't see that's like a real benefit on your side. We say like law enforcement in a lot of these minority communities is really weak because like it requires compliance to like the state that these communities do not follow through. Depression, the reason there's high rates of depression and bad economic process is because these communities are marginalized, disempowered, and oppressed by the state. We solve that on our side of the house so that the state doesn't need to come in and fix the problems that they create. I asked you about this political capital thing. I say the majority group has very weak interest in protecting the rights of these indigenous communities. I'm going to get into that later. I say that xenophobia emerges whenever the interests of these indigenous communities clash with the interests of the majority group, because the majority group is always bigger, has interest in protecting their own political interests, and all of these great quotas where like one Sami person is allowed to sit in the parliament never going to accomplish anything because they will always be outvoted, and the fact that they get outvoted brings that otherization, all that xenophobia, all that clash that you're so worried and concerned about. So giving sovereignty would sidestep this conflict by allowing these groups to actually develop like their own lifestyle and keep living a happy life. So what is going to happen? Like how is this going to improve the lives of the people in these communities, right? So immediately we tell you that we get better services because we say right now the state is not providing good enough services in these communities because you tell us, oh, like sure, like we're gonna spend way more money on this and we're gonna support them. And I said, why is that going to happen? How is that magically going to materialize? We tell you that it's much better for these communities to provide their own services. We say they get more representation because they're able to politically organize themselves, which means that people feel more engaged in the community, feel more responsive, because right now, every time they need a big change, they're responsible for the huge majority group acknowledging their rights to exist and acknowledging their interests. We tell you this is difficult. We say another immediate benefit is less abuse by the state. We tell you that in many communities, there is continual abuse by the state, whether it is like, in indigenous Latin American communities, or whether it's the Sami children who, despite all of your like beautiful claims, are not allowed to learn enough about their own culture, are not provided enough like language instruction. And we say that is abuse to their culture, and that is like constitutes something that will go away under our model. Also the sense of empowerment, the ability to self-govern. We tell you that a lot of these groups feel disempowered for centuries of abuse. We told you that there's like gross historical injustices. We say this is a solid benefit in our house. But also this idea of like sustainability, right? If we say that we care about plurality, about cultural diversity, about human dignity, the recognition of other cultural value, we tell you it's really important for us to actually be able to build a framework where these communities can exist, can grow stronger, and like people can actually stay there and live these lifestyles, right? So that's what we bring on our side of the house, and I'm going to explain that in 2 different cases, but I can take it if you like.
You say the brothers.
No,
Okay, so, but like, if we have a political capital to give someone full self-government, then probably we have political capital to give them a little bit more power over curricula and things that you are concerned about. Why we need to give them full self-government? That's your brother.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna talk about it. Okay, so there's like 2 cases, right? So in both of these cases, like these minority communities often have interests like contrary to the state, right? Like they maybe want to teach things, they maybe want to organize themselves, maybe they want to have like a different kind of legislation, right? And I think that what I'm saying is right now, what we have is like the state trying to like give like minor concessions, but not actually giving these people anything that they want. We're saying that like the best way to like solve this continual like tension between the state and minority groups on a principal basis is for the state to say, we're going to stop repressing these people because we're going to honor like their sovereignty and their right to self-governance. We're saying that the state has a moral obligation to do that, and we're saying that like by eliminating the conflicts that arise between the state and the minority communities, this is like a positive gain for the majority state, and this is why they want to give this sovereignty. Okay, so what are like the 2 different kinds of communities we're talking about, right? We have one where like these minorities communities don't pose a threat to the state, right? So we're talking about, yeah, fine, like Sami in Sweden, like they're never going to overthrow the Swedish government, right? So there, what we have on our side is this like principal case. We have this case of like retribution. We say the Swedish state has no right to impose like their coercive violence on them. They like confiscated this like land for no reason. We're saying that the Swedish government, because like they do not lose like their legitimacy or stability as a state, have the right to like give this small concession to this like culture. We say that like the state probably like values the benefits to these communities, which would be massive. We say that the redress of injustice like moving forward would be benefits for the state that they would also acknowledge. So we say like this brings benefits both to the people and to the state. And this idea that like currently under status quo, although you tell us that there's like quotas and there's like attempts to move forward in terms of like education and so on, we tell you that there is not enough that these majority governments are doing for these minority groups. So the idea is that they will eventually fade away. The idea is that all the young people will eventually like move and, become like normal Swedish people, right? Or like, whatever Americans. The idea is that the states are never going to provide enough infrastructure for these people to actually maintain the social informal institutions that are required for them to actually hold on to their culture, which means basically a very slow term extermination of that culture. Because the reason people are depressed and the reason people move away is because there are no opportunities within the community, which comes from the fact that the community is not able to self-organize, right? No. Yeah, so what I tell you is once these communities have the ability to self-organize, independent, we tell you that there's, even though this may not necessarily mean like an economic boom for them, we tell you that there's more reason to stay because you're part of a stronger community that isn't like something that is just kind of tacked onto the majority community. But the second case is like where these communities actually do pose a threat to the state, right? And in many cases around the world, we say that there is like a tension between like the interests of like these indigenous communities and the interests of the majority community. So this is like especially the case in terms of like indigenous groups in Latin America, where like in many cases these groups hold on to land or something where the government has no real incentive to include them in like the political making decision process. And although, okay, obviously this is, Okay? In different countries, things happen differently. But in many cases, the logic of the state isn't to act against the interests of these majority groups, or at best to like exploit them. And we tell you that the best way to resolve this conflict is for them to cede the right to self-governance of these people. And we say that the way that this resolution could be reached, the state could still have the upper hand in the negotiation, but the people would then be able to have a stable equilibrium political and social system that is independent of the state, and then whatever agreement that would be reached would be something that both of the groups would begin to operate on, rather than having this kind of slow encroachment, continual abuse, and exploitation of these people. So we solve the problems in both these kinds of communities. Please let these people lead. Please acknowledge the right of these communities to exist. Please work on this.
Thanks very much. And now the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Here. We good? Okay.
Thank you very much. First, I want to ask what sovereignty is and how we provide it to the most amount of people. And second, I want to ask how best we provide state relations between the overlord state and the community. And second, I want to talk about what it's like for individuals and their ability to achieve personal prosperity. But before I do, 2 points. The first is to ask what we stand for, because I don't think it is fair to say that we have to go back to the status quo or to expect trickle-down effects. There are massive things that as government we can do right now. First off, government quotas would be reasonable, vetoes would equally be reasonable. Second, massive economic infrastructure would be important to do and good things to do right now. Our case in general is that you are able to support specific freedoms within a community, but you must first impose a rule of law that cannot be broken by those cultural norms, that you must protect individuals on a personal basis to the standard that that state supports. I do not believe in legal norms being the overarching thing or allowing full autonomy in that manner within the state. To the extent that I'm being optimistic in opposition, we can concede that, but we have structural reasons why we will get more benefits of what we would like going forward than theirs. The second point of rebuttal is really important, because they say that an awful lot of depression and issues within these issues is because of past oppressions. These past oppressions are in fact current. It is necessary to realize that this proposition was explained to you in a way that it can only succeed with funding on an ongoing basis from the other states. These are unviable economic zones that will only be able to succeed if the past state is willing to continue funding them. That means 2 things. First, we say that since this seems unlikely, if they fail on our side of giving less support, there is still, whatever the state has, engagement still lingers in that area. On their side, they have literally nothing, and people starve on the streets. The second thing that's really important is that I have reasons to believe that a state would be more likely to support them on our side than theirs, and that wins the debate because they told you that they depend on state support. Before I get into that, I want to talk about the first point, which is what is autonomy, or what is sovereignty, and how do we give it to most people? Just to frame this point, this is nothing to do with how we think the state will interact with them going forward. We have 2 principal harms regardless in this motion and 2 reasons why it should fall. So it doesn't depend on the analysis that they actually get. First, it just confuses me if they make a principal claim to people's autonomy to rule themselves while accepting that it will be restricted to this land. For example, with the American people, when they came, plundered, and stole the United States, I'm not sure why reservations is all that the American Indians should be left. This is an ongoing atrocity which pins them down to a specific area of land in which they own, and they own no more. That means they benefit no longer from any of the resources from the rest of that nation. This is comparatively better on opposition, when you have those resources consistently being funneled into the state, with we claim more access to individuals being able to gain them, and those people being recognized as full US citizens that can travel all over and gain those benefits. This is an atrocity in and of itself as a proposition, so we don't principally think it can be supported. The second thing is that I don't know what they mean by saying that people want sovereignty. I mean, everybody wants to do what they want with their lives. What we think is the state's job is to best balance the competing concerns of individuals. I think wanting to feel a cultural alignment with whatever community I came from is one of many competing values that these people have. Other values that we think are important and must be considered are things like a right to security and a future. What we would point out is that there are 2 massive dangers here. The first is just a sheer lack of infrastructure and resources. I do not believe that the police who are now in the Swami community, or whatever structures that exist, are as sophisticated and as advanced in terms of the net level of legal support as we can provide outside of. I want our policemen to be patrolling this because I think any person who is abused or wronged or in any way legally abused should be protected. We equally think that there is, and this is where we edge towards like cultural sensitivity in terms of there are just some norms that I would not be very comfortable being imposed upon within some of these communities. We think there are massive issues in terms of the openness of some communities, in terms of married communities being able to first off identify, prosecute sexual assault and rape, particularly committed by individuals or higher up in those communities. I do not think it is okay to turn to the person who is attacked and say, but you see, it's all about autonomy and letting you control your life, and therefore we have no power to put policemen in here or to impose moral norms. That to us, we think they are massively overemphasizing the amount that people need their cultural heritage. Just to add into that weigh-in, I'm perfectly happy to allow whatever education systems they want. I'm perfectly happy to allow whatever cultural norms to a large extent, and we have most of their benefits. But there is a hard line that we draw in terms of the actual individual needs that people have and why sovereignty can't vanish it. Just to be clear, our general stance on sovereignty is that we happen to have been put in a position where we are currently in control of these areas and we can impose laws and norms. It is morally unacceptable for you to abdicate that responsibility to the individuals who might be hurt. Second point, though, and I would point out that that in and of itself is sufficient reason to oppose this motion, regardless of the amount of general infrastructure or wealth that goes into them, because those minorities, those individuals who are the victims of crime, cannot be sacrificed for a general collective good. But the second point is that they think that whenever norms clash and there is a disagreement, the majority will always win. That's problematic because we think money being taken from the majority and given to this minority state is a clash. I see no reason under their logic why the country that just was seceded from will want to go on funding these people. We do, however, have 5 reasons why we think that it is comparatively better on our side. What we mean is that you're likely to get some more funding or some more concessions in some instances. The first is that we think that there's is the obvious thing that's already mentioned in terms of having voting blocks, vetoes, voices in parliament, which are not, like, they're not always determinative. But when most parliaments are made up of minorities and you need to get individual seats for individual votes, it often is reasonable for the majority to try not to step on too many toes, to do things like allow travelling education for the Roma community, to make very important small concessions that don't harm them themselves. But they have no reason to do that on their side. Second, I will take a point really quick if anyone has it.
I mean, like, the symbolic concessions are not enough. What we're claiming is we need, like, to give this community the chance to live, which doesn't exist on your side.
My problem is that long term, I can't see that happening on your side. Long term, they give money now, but they need long term, ongoing goodwill to keep propping up the state. I have no idea why it exists. The second reason is because there is a narrative that they are at least part of us, our nation, and that they have not actively spat in our face and said that they wanted to leave. The third is because there is some benefit in terms of more of a crossover of individuals leaving and providing economic work, like labour, little worker drones, as we call them in capitalism, to our society, and so more reason to go to them. So the final reason, quite important actually, is that it's just easy to leave things in status quo, right? If there are ongoing support that wants an open channel, then you're able to leave that. Once this state is being closed off and every single year we have to ask, should we give more money to that country that isn't us? It is always the first thing that's likely to be cut and difficult to cut down politically. The final thing that I want to deal with is they said it is easy to leave these countries for individuals who want to. I don't think that is true when they allow them to be divided in terms of everything from the opportunities you're giving, the education system, the legal norms, and the languages that you're taught, and your ability to go elsewhere is massively diminished. These are usually not very rich places, and the people coming from them usually don't have an awful lot of enfranchisement and employability. We think that they have a right to be able to move wherever they would like within the country which they were originally born in, at least. We're very proud of that.
Thanks very much. And now the member of government. Here.
We think it's important to recognize that these communities in the status quo already have leaders enfranchised, that there's often like high rates of criminality, incredibly high rates of alcohol use, incredibly high rates of depression, and issues like that. We see that in the status quo, trying to integrate them within our society, or just like mentioning alternative approaches without ever explaining why they would solve these types of issues isn't enough. We think that we need to give them their own country in order to fix these issues. In my speech, I will explain to you, why do you think that the specific political needs that these indigenous communities have can in no other way be secured than through giving them their own government? Before I do this, I'm going to move into quite a lot of rebuttal. If I have time left, there will be a little part at the end of my speech. So firstly, they sort of like shortly mention these possible alternatives without ever explaining like how or why they exactly would work. So we think they have to do that in order for them to, in order for those to be viable. So what they mentioned firstly is so like why not give them a veto right so that they can veto certain policies that would harm them. We say that first of all, the fact that you allow them to like halt national legislation harms the entire population, only creates more backlash against them, and like turns them into a scapegoat for like delaying or halting national policies, and it's only going to create more hate against them. So we think there are specific like drawbacks to this solution that don't make the solution very great. The second of all, we talk about, or maybe we can, assign a specific number of seats to them in parliament so that they do have a vote now. We think that the problem with that is that like the small number of seats you are going to give them are never going to be sufficient to actually like stop any policy or to actually come up with any policy. And we think that because the needs of these people are so fundamentally different from the rest of the country, they're never going to be able to like sway other parties. They're never going to be able to gather enough votes to be supported. As I'll explain later. Okay. So then they talk about sort of the atrocities going on within those communities and how we can't fight them at the moment that they get their own state. We think that they kind of assume that we are able to fight them in the status quo, and we don't think that's true. At the moment that these communities are already looked down upon, and these communities already lack trust in the national state, and at the moment that they already talk about how for young girls they sort of have to respect the elderly in their village, and there already is pressure to like stay quiet. It's unclear why they would all of a sudden trust national police, why they would all of a sudden be able to solve that. So we don't think that is actually a viable alternative. We say second of all, even if their police even if the police force of these own indigenous communities that come up with themselves are slightly less rich and don't fight all of the injustices going on, we think at least that police force trusted is able to execute some sort of form of law enforcement, which we think that the national government is currently completely unable to do because of lack of trust in this national police. All right. So then they go on to talk about sort of this them versus us narrative and how it sort of strengthens divide between indigenous communities and the rest of the country. It is important to note that within the status quo, often these indigenous communities are looked down upon. They are already seen as less developed, being dumber or more likely to go into criminality or those kinds of things. So we think that this sort of us versus them narrative already exists. We actually think that you're more likely to create less tension between people in the country and indigenous communities, because now you actually allow them to self-govern. You give them the opportunity to show that they are capable of governing their own country. You take away the prejudice that people often have that they are dumb and that they are underdeveloped. I think they're more likely to be respected as a result of this policy. Okay. All right. So moving on to my own point of extension. We think that there are 2 points of context that you need to take into consideration first. As I already said, it's important to note that these communities are often already heavily disenfranchised within the status quo, that there are huge issues within the status quo. We put the example of in Australia how there's very high rates of Aboriginals in their prisons, a lot more than there relatively more than there are within their country. So I think there are huge issues in the status quo that are being solved. We think at second of all, it's important to realize that often these indigenous communities have very strong ties to a specific area of land. That is because they often lived there for a very, very long time in a specific area of land. I think also that often their culture and their daily life on that specific area of land, because they are often communities that rely more on things like agriculture and using within their land in order to sustain themselves. So we think that they have very strong ties to the land that we live in. Okay. So we think that the problem in the status quo is that the national government doesn't recognize these ties and these specific needs, and that these vastly different ways of living means that their needs aren't represented in national government. So then they talk about these possible alternatives of how they would get a say in national politics. We say it's impossible to do that because often, as I already said, these indigenous communities are looked down upon in the status quo. So that means that for parties it's very hard to represent them, because the moment that you do that, you become sort of a scapegoat party, you lose majority of your other voters. We don't think that's ever an interesting possibility for parties to do. We say on top of that, often indigenous communities aren't politically engaged. It's not a part of their culture, and they feel like the national politics don't care about them. So they are unlikely to ever sort of better their situation through national politics. Okay. So we say that because they are currently, their political interests aren't preserved in the status quo. I think that it means that, for example, policies are economically beneficial for the entire country, but that ruin their sacred land are currently happening. Before I move on to the one.
Yeah. The premise of your whole case is those governments will have people in charge who are not corrupted, who are not elite, and who are not like oppressing people to the same extent or to more extent than the government. What are the warrants for that?
I think you should explain why these people are corrupt. We think that often as I already said, these people have very strong ties to their country, like to their specific area of land, and they respect it very much. So we do think that they have sort of the interest of their area and their people at heart, because there's a very strong sense of community, there's a very strong sense of looking out for each other. So we don't think that's going to happen. So, as I said, we think that policies that aren't are economically beneficial for an entire country, but that ruin their sacred land are being put through government right now. We think you're taking away their land. We think it's incredibly harmful. Like we point to the example of Standing Rock in the United States, which is happening right now. So we think that it's better for them to govern themselves, so they can decide how to how their land needs to be taken care of. We think that you prevent sort of what is happening right now, that they sort of are forced to integrate, that they're being pushed into poverty, that they're being pushed into criminality. Before I end, hi mom, I'm finding it on stream. I hope.
Thank you very much. And now the member of the opposition. Here. Yeah.
I'm Mother of Emma. As always, I will be supporting Emma's case. Thank you for the floor, dear Chair. First of all, what we've seen from opening government is that they explain why these people are forced to be part of the country and why that's not right. We as closing government explain to you why full self-government is really needed by answering two questions. First of all, who can take care best of this area? Second of all, what is best for the indigenous communities? So first, I will go into Republic. From opening opposition, we heard that these people can't self-govern because they promised a lot of other things. We believe that these issues are still there on the opposition side, as it was the case since we occupied these areas. And on the opposition side, this will be even worse, because on their side of the house, they're urged to follow the rules of the Western world. While on our side of the house, they get self-governance where they can decide together how they treat each other and which rules they want to have, which means that their rules will be more effective and are also accepted, because they're also accepted because they decide themselves which rules they have, and people live the way they want to live. We think that every person has the right to do so. Then opening opposition said there are other ways to give these groups power. But we're saying the government of the Western world will never allow these real influences if the capitalistic and Western world influence are more important for them, and they are more important for them. And for example, in Sweden, veto doesn't mean power to create or implement policies, which are actually exactly the things which are needed for these groups, because they have to create their own policies to take care best of the area. Then opening opposition said groups can't survive without money or the support of the state. But the opposition doesn't seem to understand how these people live. They don't care about the money, about the roads, or about other policies of the government. The groups use nature resources, live in agriculture, and live in that way for how long they've been living in these areas. So from our side, the groups can even survive better. On the opposition sides, these groups, the government, the capitalistic goals decides what is best for them. On our side of the house, the government of these indigenous communities focuses on maintaining the way these groups are living, are happy living, which means better policies for the agriculture and other ways they're living. So they're better off on our side of the house. And closing opposition had a whole story about investors and that is good how to attract them. But again, this is not in the benefit of these groups to have groups in their area. First of all, because they don't want that, because they have their own culture and they don't care about the Western culture. Secondly, because they don't want to be dependent on the Western world. They don't want other leaders to decide what's best for them and to be dependent on them also in the form of income. And thirdly, they don't need it because they're perfectly able to survive in the area since they have been doing that before we occupied the areas, for example, as we did in Australia and Alaska. First of all.
Your case is that a national parliament will never be successful on a referendum. We said that's correct, and that's why we support a large amount of regional autonomy. But we still demand basic norms and the ability to enforce law and order. Why is it that that's not something we should be trying to provide?
Because we believe that again, the policies you do propose are about, for example, vetoes. It doesn't mean that they can actually execute their own policies. So we believe that these brave people have the right to decide for themselves how they're living, and I will explain that later in answering the following question. So the first question we're going to answer is who can take care best of the area? This is a very important issue because it's a task of the government to treat their ground the best, and it's task of people to take care of the world, so to make sure that our children can live happily after in the future. On the opposite side, we have Washington, we have Canberra, where the people knows best, think that they know best what is best for the area. They don't explain why this is the case. And secondly, these governments have more incentives to care about money, about industrialization, and not about what is best for the area, for the environment of that area. On our side of the house, we have the indigenous communities who are fully depending. Where we think of that they can take care best of these areas. First of all, because they're fully depending on the area, so there's incentives to use and to maintain the resources in the area best. And second of all, they have the best knowledge of the area because they live there for their entire living, and they used to be, they know what the nature there needs. So the impact of this is that in a world where we're currently living, where environmental policies aren't effective and where maintaining nature is a big issue, we have now chance to give certain groups who are best able to maintain the area full governance of that area. So that means that first of all, resources in that area will be used and maintained best, which is the task of the government, and we now give the government, the best government, that task. And second of all, that the nature of the area will then be prioritized over capitalistic needs, such as building a pipeline through nature, which would have been done by, for example, the government in Washington or in the Western world. So in the end, the indigenous communities can take care best of the area, which is best for everyone. Second question: what is best for the indigenous community themselves? This is a very important question, and we believe that the capitalistic Western government is better off anyways. Because first of all, these indigenous people don't pay many taxes, so that doesn't matter that much. And also, they don't have the police there anymore; that they can just fully focus on their own people, their own Western role. And thirdly, thank you, citizens in the Western world wouldn't care about losing a part of Alaska, for example. So that also is not an issue. So the most important thing is what is best for the indigenous community. On the proposition side, we're saying the Western capitalistic government in the capital don't know what is best for the indigenous community. They don't care about what these groups need. They don't care as much about the area as these groups, and they will always care more about the government, about the 99% of the other citizens, and about their needs, and about capitalistic influences. But they will never be in favor of the indigenous community. And I already explained to you what is now the problem in the status quo. First of all, huge integration problems in the mother country, in the mother state. They can't influence policies. They're seen as less worthy, and thirdly, they don't need the policies of the mother state or the support of the states, because roads, trains, Western education, they don't use that. They have their own way of living. Indigenous communities just want to decide for themselves what is best and how to govern and how to make their own rules. The Western world, I will explain to you why they have their right. The Western world has their own way of living. We go to education, go to university, find a job, work 5 days a week, and that's the way we live. They also have the right to choose for themselves what is their best way of living. And so on our side of life, we give them full governance, which means they will feel more worthy, which leads to better relationship with the state, with the mother states, since they are accepted. Maybe it leads to better corporations, and they can make decisions for themselves, which are best for themselves. They have the right to make those decisions, and they will then be able to best maintain their agricultural way of living. We believe that is best for them. Therefore, I beg you to propose.
Thank you very much. And now, stream or no stream? No stream. The opposition whip to close out the case for the opposition bench, and indeed